Products regulator has agreed to the emergency use of Ivermectin in South Africa. But there's a caveat. The authority is stressing there isn't enough data to show if the drug actually works against COVID-19. The regulator facing grilling from Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Health today, and reporter Govan Whittles is following those important proceedings very carefully. So what do we know then about the status of Ivermectin?
Well, Jeremy, Ivermectin is available to medical practitioners and patients who would like to use it in South Africa now that the regulator has opened the floodgates, essentially, to access Ivermectin legally through an application to the regulator on condition that the medical practitioner then fills out an 8-page form which would keep meticulous record of how the patient has responded to Ivermectin, under which circumstances the drug was prescribed, and where they got it and in which dosage they eventually administered Ivermectin. This is important because the regulator says that right now there is no medical practitioner in South Africa that can say for sure that Ivermectin prescribed to patients is indeed the authentic drug, and they can't be sure of the dosage which they're administering at the moment, because the only legal Ivermectin in the country is used for veterinary services, and the ones that are imported illegally don't go through the stringent testing and approval by SAPHRA, which is what ensures that the patients are in fact getting the right drug. But SAPHRA says they've acknowledged the mounting calls from some doctors for Ivermectin to be made available, but there simply isn't enough data. They've got clinical trials where about 2,000 people took part. Remember, we spoke about those that happened in Brazil, in Japan, and Egypt. But they say they need trials with at least 10,000 people. And as of right now, there is no benefit for taking Ivermectin in fighting the coronavirus. What's important here is that SAPHRA says they've found that Ivermectin doesn't necessarily help, but it doesn't cause harm either. Let's have a look at what the chairperson of the SAPHRA board had to say.
An illegal market has developed because of this situation. The situation where people are using veterinary products or illegally imported products that claim to be Ivermectin, but no practitioner who's getting an illegally imported product will have any proof that that is Ivermectin, nor, even if it's Ivermectin, what dosage it is. Because when you have illegally imported products, you have no proof of quality, and as I say, no proof even that that's the product that you're buying. That situation is a dangerous situation when you're using veterinary and you're using illegally imported products. And that is why we try to, while we wait for the bigger data to come through, which will hopefully, as I say, break this logjam, say yes or no. Does it work? Yes. Does it work? No. And that's what the world is waiting for. That's what WHO is also waiting for. Everyone is aligned on this. While we waited for that, we wanted to make sure that if doctors who felt very strongly that they wanted to have access to Ivermectin, and as I say, there are doctors on both sides of the fence who have very different views, but for those who did, at least we can ensure that the product that they apply for and that they give will be a product that's designed for human consumption and where the dosage is known to them, so that they can then take an independent clinical decision. This is called off-label use. Nowhere in the world is Ivermectin registered for the treatment or prevention of COVID. And even if none of the vaccines work, to another honourable member's question, if you don't know that Ivermectin works, you can't replace something else with something that you don't know.
So a clearly concerned Professor Helen Rees. So what now, Govan Whittles? We wait for that big data, as she puts it.
Yeah, we'll wait for that data to come in, but at the same time, the SAPHRA, the regulator, will continue receiving the feedback from these medical practitioners who will be prescribing Ivermectin to their patients. So there's double monitoring happening here. It's the controlled clinical trial of at least 10,000 people, which will give a definitive answer on whether or not Ivermectin could help in fighting the coronavirus. But on the other hand, it's a pseudo-clinical trial where medical practitioners in South Africa will now be sending hefty documentation to SAPHRA about how Ivermectin has responded in the patient's system and whether or not they've picked up any negative side effects. So that's what we're waiting for now, but of course SAPHRA says they'll be able to make that call sooner rather than later. They expect in a month or two.
Govan Whittles reporting.